Welcome to the video on our channel Star Spotlight. We'll examine in detail the extraordinary life of the legendary Vivien Leigh actress who enthralled viewers with her ability and beauty, but she also struggled enormous internal conflicts that are well known. Throughout the world as the iconic Southern Belle, the journey of Scarlett O'Hara, Vivien was more theatrical than any of her parts on screen, since her 1913 birth in the Darjeeling, India's stunning hills, toe-merging as one of Hollywood's most talented stars. The tale of Vivien is one of perseverance, intrigue, and intricacy. Pay attention as we reveal the aspects of her life that are hidden, includes the heritage she concealed, in order to thrive in a highly competitive Hollywood amid the difficulties that influenced, at the age of 6, her unforgettable legacy. Vivien, who was years old, was sent to England's boarding school, where she didn't see her for 2 years. Mother's estrangement from her family felt comforted by discussing her dreams, with her school pal's admission that she would go on to become a well-known actress, and she would, even though she wasn't yet able to consider the cost that fame would impose. Vivien fell in the early 1930s, deeply infatuated with Herbert Lee Holman, a 13-year-old attorney, despite her encouraging academic performance at she left the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. Holman at the Academy, and they married on December 20th, 1932, yet the union distinguished by their "it was difficult to deal with differences." 10 months later, Vivien gave birth to Suzanne, their daughter, at just 19. As Vivien was rekindled by her ambitions, an agency suggested that she leave her wedded life. Vivien's name, after ignoring a number of awkward suggestions that she took on the last name, Holman's middle name. Leigh, and making the spelling correction, changed her Vivien's first name, adds a feeling of awe and glamour equipped with a fresh identity that she was prepared to adopt. Vivien, a Hollywood star in 1935, was 22 years old, got her breakthrough part as Henriette in The Mask of Virtue in the provocative play. She was commended for her performance, applause and fierce criticism, praise that sped up her ascent in the entertainment world while the plays are being performed. She went to see a show that included, in England, Laurence Olivier is among the most fascinating new actors enthralled, she said. I'm getting married to a pal. Ignoring the reality that she and Vivien's were already married to Olivier. After Olivier's, audacity had no limits. She sneaked into his clothes for the last bow. Room gave her introduction, and following bravely kissed him after a little conversation. Before departing, on the neck, it's no amazement at being mesmerized by Vivien's intriguing part in The Mask of Virtue obtained a substantial deal for her, and she appeared in the high-profile film shortly after. This role is not in the movie. Fire Over England not only furthered her career but also brought her and her now-secret lover back together. Laurence Olivier's contributions to Fire's success over England was a momentous pivotal moment in Vivien Leigh's career, launching her into the Hollywood highlight, but the film is real. For her, allure extended beyond the role. It was Laurence, her co-star. Olivier and their working partnerships swiftly changed into a deep friendship, which quickly turned into an passionate relationship between Leigh and Olivier, were previously married to other persons, each having a small child, completing their prohibited link and risky. But as their relationship deepened, Olivier made the tough decision to abandon his. Within a year of meeting a wife and son, despite being social and legal, Vivien limitations maintained the link between the two. Both of their spouses were hidden, ready to grant a divorce by coercion. Olivier and Vivien will continue their real connection in secret. By Vivien appeared to have everything in 1937, thriving career, unquestionable ability, and a dashing, committed lover at her side. However, this ostensibly perfect life was obscured by the appearance of a significant mental sickness during the Hamlet performance. Vivien's first appearance on stage identified a bipolar episode during one disturbing moment when she lost her temper, shouting at Olivier out of rage, only to abruptly cease behaving as though nothing had happened. This incident hinted at what would turn into an agonizing and long-lasting battle. With the worsening of her episodes over time, that same year saw a significant Vivien was bedridden due to an ankle injury, while when she healed, she kept herself busy by writing Margaret's Gone with the Wind, Mitchell's expansive epic revelation. David O. Selnick was working on a movie modification of the book she turned into. Adamant about playing Scarlett O'Hara, Selznick was impressed by her Skill, Boutat first questioned whether a British actress could represent the southern essence of unfazed. Vivien went after the duty with unwavering perseverance a decision, which Olivier characterized as demonic. Her opportunity arrived when Olivier's Mayon, the agent brother, set up a meeting. With Selnick following a thrilling display test, Vivien took first place, obtaining one of the most sought-after Hollywood roles. Gone with the Wind's production. The movie was quite taxing. The shooting schedule took months to complete. Vivien's workweek is frequently extended to 16 long hours spent on the actual production, was afflicted by ongoing modifications, with 3 distinct directors writing through to finish the project before. Departing reduced morale in spite of her considerable task that is almost twice as much as hers. Vivien's co-star Clark Gable received just a portion of his pay. She and Gable believed the movie would not be profitable, but they were incorrect. The film evolved into more than just a historic achievement, but after accounting for inflation, the top-grossing movie Overways, this part brought Vivien the last Hollywood acclaim and Best Actress Academy Award at the young age of 26, night that ought to have been filled with pure joy turned gloomy when it was definitely a high point in the career of, according to reports, Vivien Olivier had trouble with fierce jealousy, according to Tarkin, his son, on the ride home that night. Olivia held her Oscar tightly, scarcely able to withstand the urge to strike her with it for a brief minute. Thereafter characterized as an episode of unreasonable. Despite this tension in 1940, jealousy gave joy to the couple. They ultimately got divorced from each other. Spouses and formally joined the united, but at a significant personal expense to complete. The divorces, each of them had to give up original custody of their children. Their nuptials were an discreet, intimate relationship with currently serving as the matron of honor, although their initial partnership as a married pair would demonstrate sadly. They spent over $10,000 into a Romeo and Juliet stage performance. Juliet wants to record the enchantment. The play was shared off-stage, was a significant and monetary failure, straining their respective budgets, and their connection across this a challenging time in her life. Vivien Leigh's mental health suffered greatly. Her bipolar disorder is becoming worse, into erratic and severe episodes. Representative pointed out that throughout these events that might cause her personality to shift, her voice would sharpen dramatically and furious, and her war-torn eyes would change to a chilly, faraway gaze. After these outbursts are often wiped out, unable to remember what had happened, allowing her to deal with the fallout on pro-ESS with intense feelings of guilt and terror regret about bipolar illness in the past, known as manic depressive disorder, is characterized by drastic mood swings that range from manic bouts or emotional peaks to depression-characterized lows. People may go through a manic phase. Energy spikes, elation or agitation, frequently coupled with impetuous actions, whereas periods of depression cause profound melancholy with a sense of helplessness, and a decline in enthusiasm for most life's elements. For Vivien, in these mood swings were quite strong, and they covered her with a long shadow. Interpersonal connections in addition to her work-related obligations. At the moment, bipolar disorder therapies were somewhat restricted and frequently intrusive by today's standards. Vivien experienced a number of electroconvulsive treatment sessions. ECT is a process that uses the use of tiny electric currents to the brain in order to purposefully cause midway through the 20th century short convulsions. One of the limited options was ECT. Therapies for severe mental health problems such as bipolar dysfunction, although the process had significant adverse consequences like memory loss and perplexity. For Vivien, the remaining treatment, physical scars on her temples, burns, and friends, saw significant changes in her conduct following each session. That is observed changes in her disposition that appeared distant from who she really was. In spite of these significant obstacles, Vivien's dedication to her work persisted. Undiminished, she kept on delivering strong performances that highlighted her extraordinary talent and resiliency, but the absence of efficient choices for supportive treatment and a limited comprehension of bipolar at the time, chaos meant that Vivien, having to face her illness head-on with tremendous, small external, reinforce her experiences and highlight the vital requirement for improvements in mental health care, and emphasize the significance of empathy and sympathy for people dealing with these conditions. Carry out in 1943, While volunteering amusing the Allied forces in the North Africa, Vivien became gravely ill. Not until the subsequent year that physicians determined that she received treatment for TB and seemed to bounce back, though, as they would subsequently discover that the sickness had merely been momentarily quiet, not healed. The incorrect diagnosis and her persistent health issues would follow her, turning into yet another terrible component in her life has become more and more challenging. Following an arduous recuperation from Vivien's TB was identified as the started her filmmaking career in 1944, but her return was hampered by disappointments she experienced after being cast amid a string of failed movies, and to her annoyance, she missed a desired part in the movie Rebecca Olivier, his husband, was appearing in after she turned down the starring part in a choice she would make in Pride and Prejudice, come to lament the weight of these failures, largely on her, and her psychological well-being started to worsen even more during Caesar and Cleopatra's. Filming in tragic events occurred on one scene in 1945. Vivien was necessary to traverse a smooth floor, slipping in a moment of carelessness. She suffered a devastating mishap while she was expecting when the fall occurred, which resulted in a miscarriage that left her in a severe and protracted depression. This sadness, combined with the deteriorating bipolar disorder's effects, made her life is becoming more and more difficult, and her mental health, as well as those around her, battles that resulted to increased and uncontrolled inclinations, such as a notable rise in her libido, which caused her to make a number of rash Vivien's affairs, led her to intimate meet strangers at counters, including delivery workers and cab drivers, frantically trying to calm her illness-related restlessness. When Vivien and Olivier were on tour, Australia, Olivier found a vibrant young performer, Peter Finch, whose talent captivated him and made him want to coach the talented performer, asked Finch to take the stage with him, giving him a significant break in his career. Peter Finch, whose career was largely dependent on Olivier, quickly found himself embroiled in a passionate relationship with Vivien that has a lot to Olivier's disappointment. By 1948, the tolerance of Olivier with Vivien's severe mood fluctuations and a lot of affairs has weakened due to the constant stress of controlling her erratic behavior, and he left her because of her increased craving for intimacy, worn down after a long battle. He now found himself wanting to be with her, almost feeling relieved that she had discovered a different way to deal with her restless, Finch's desires, and Vivien Leigh took part in one of the most difficult times in her life. Her Laurence Olivier's marriage was disintegrating due to the pressure of personal disparities and the deterioration of Vivien's bipolar illness, which caused her to life getting harder and harder together. Her marriage's emotional turmoil, Vivien's physical well-being also declined. She struggled with extreme sleeplessness that left her worn out and exposed deprivation, her of the vitality required to confront every day throughout this delicate time frame, during which she was given the opportunity to Williams. Blanche Dubois in Tennessee, a desire is a street vehicle that would come to define her professional life. Blanche Dubois' persona is a terrible and incredibly complicated figure, one whose susceptibility and mental frailty reflects the confusion that Vivien was going through what Leigh through in her own life, putting herself into the position with unparalleled commitment when engrossed in Blanche's disturbed mental state. Her performance brought layers of depth and complexity to the persona that is gaining her a lot of receiving praise from critics and establishing her status as among Hollywood's most actresses with skill. But this absorption came at a significant personal expense. Vivien played Blanche on more than 300 stages. Performances as well as the emotional burden of Blanche's delusions of despair and sense of doom started to creep into her own mind. Later on, Leigh acknowledged that in the character's actions had prompted her to, the boundaries are blurred on the verge of madness, between the character and herself to a risky degree. Vivien's experience as Blanche illuminates the profound psychological effects that are profound, the effects of immersive acting on actors, especially those who are already engaged in wrestling with mental health issues, while Blanche was portrayed by Leigh in a triumphant manner that would be honored forever. In Hollywood also emphasized the ignored toll that is so demanding an actor's well-being can be incorporated into roles, being her dedication to capturing Blanche's suffering and distress in spite of the enormous personal expense is evidence of to her commitment to her art. but it also highlights the dangers that performers confront who devote themselves entirely to intricate roles that are emotionally draining, particularly without the supporter being aware of. The knowledge of mental health issues today may have offered assistance when Hollywood decided to make a movie out of a streetcar what Vivien had to battle valiantly to obtain. Resuming the job of Blanche at first, the director had doubts about her appropriateness, but she was able to persuade him of her dedication, and her co-star Marlon Brando's ability was said to be drawn to her, but held return out of consideration for his friendship. With Olivier's commitment to Blanche was rewarded. However, Vivien received her second Academy Award. Similar to the triumph, her prior Oscar victory was short-lived. The emotional stress from Blanche's portrayal left her even more. Vivien was a vulnerable able dot in 1953, cast in Elephant Walk in the hopes that the undertaking would mark yet a new begin. Regrettably, while filming her, mental health quickly declined. Her paranoia developed as a result of her insomnia, and she was plagued by hallucinations every day when her illness got unmanageable. Paramount Studios made the challenging choice to use Elizabeth in her place. Taylor is lonely and having difficulties. Found comfort in an affair once more with Peter Finch, her ex-lover, who was her co-star on Elephant Walk as well. Following their dismissal from the movie, Vivien returned to Los Angeles by plane, physically and emotionally exhausted when returning to Los Angeles by plane following her sudden departure. From Elephant Walk, Vivien was overtaken by anxiousness during a period of extreme distress. She reported having a strong urge to get off the plane for a brief, eerie moment that people in attendance remembered it as actually. This point, Vivien's mental state is alarming. State was brittle and erratic. As her conduct became increasingly unpredictable, she would occasionally scream for hours by herself, and the dressing room was overrun by unruly episodes of emotion, each of which would end only after sedation was given. Making her regain some semblance of serenity, Olivier ultimately made the challenging choice to return her to England, where she was placed in an asylum for a period of 3 months, during which she underwent several rounds of electroshock treatment. In spite of the best attempts to keep her troubles at bay, confidential information on Vivien's breakdown leaked, as was practically a given. Her notoriety, despite Olivier's prior, endured the peaks and valleys of their life together, including her liaison with Finch's marriage, was about to end. The strain even leaked at the breaking point into their appearances in public with viewers who are seeing hostile conversations during performances that Vivien became obsessed with, negative evaluations that charged Olivier with purposefully downplaying his ability to prevent his less talented wife from taking center stage. Despite Olivier's attempts to comfort her that these complaints were baseless, the in 1956 damage was already done. Vivien, who was 44 years old, experienced another sadly miscarriage, similar to her earlier loss. The sadness sent her into a deep. Her heartache was exacerbated by her depression, given that she was engrossed in a challenging part in Shakespeare's play, and the strain turned out to be intolerable when traveling over Europe. For Titus Andronicus's production, mental health suffered greatly throughout. In one episode, she lost her way in A1 clothing in a public park as a sign of how she was really ill, and later she snapped at Olivier out of anger, slapping him with a damp cloth, causing toss her across the room in his arms. At this moment, Olivia had defended herself, reached his limit after 20 years of dating, he believed he could no longer put up with her erratic behavior episodes, and ultimately led her to discover actress Joan Plowright provides consolation, despite his later admission that no one would never be able to match Vivien's heart. He understood that her mental health condition made their partnership is not sustainable. Following their split, they quickly started a new romance with an actress. The person who assumed the function of caretaker, who is sympathetic to her bipolar illness. Oliver was assured by Merivale that he would keep an eye on her, so Olivier can feel convinced that she was safe hands. With this assurance, he made the final. Following their 1960 divorce, Olivier tried to keep up a civil relationship after divorce, and even penned a sincere letter expressing gratitude for her boldness and elegance throughout there. Despite her dignity, the separation was heartbreaking. Vivien's actions started with the breakup, to become even more strange after. When she rented a car, she became very upset. By the hue she insisted it be repainted, she also became accustomed to bringing her priceless Picasso and Renoir artwork with her wherever she went. It seems impossible to let them go. In an attempt to find solace in her craft, Vivien took on a part in the stage production of The Toik in 1963, hoped that giving a performance would provide an emotional release. Regrettably, the experience turned terrible. Vivien experienced a serious malfunction during the manufacturing process. She keeps forgetting her singing lines. At drastically off tempos and even yelling at her co-stars in plain sight of the crowd, her actions were so predictable that she had to be at one time sedated and physically restrained. Amazingly, in spite of these difficulties, performance was nonetheless praised, earning a Tony Award, which is evidence of her exceptional talent despite the The continuous struggle of Vivien's personal turmoil with bipolar illness persisted through her subsequent profession in 1965 while filming. She had another Ship of Fools experience, terrible. Event that occurred during an attack scene. She got so engrossed that she unintentionally hit her co-star Leigh with a high heel. Marvin leaves enduring scar on his face as a result of this. Vivien's tragic accident marked her last movie appearance. Sadly, her condition significantly deteriorated. Worse, during the warm months of the reappearance of her TB in 1967, violently restrained in her bed, she tried to get better, but one evening when up to go to the bathroom, she fainted before her partner Jack arrived. When Morale discovered her, she had already died. Despite the fact that Vivien and Olivier had, after 7 years apart, he hurried, after she heard the news, to her side, assisting Morale in setting up her funeral, arranged for her cremation, and ensured her ash was strewn throughout the house where she'd admired London theatres, and paid respect to the life and legacy of Vivien Leigh by lowering their lights in her room for 1 hour honor. But possibly the most moving, Olivier himself paid homage, saying in the weeks leading up to his own demise, claimed to have seen one of her movies, and he broke down in tears, overtaken with passion. Gently stated that this was love. Vivien had felt the same way to his statement that I would prefer had a brief existence with Larry as opposed to withstand a lengthy one without him.